been a pretty brutal winter here at the Rugged Homestead. First had the furnace vent motor go out on me, then I had my truck heat go out on me, and now I've discovered a leak in the steam heat radiator pipes. It's actually not the first leak I've found, and I've been patching it up as I go, hoping to be able to get through the winter before having to replace the system. But I found another hole today, so we're going to go around and patch it. I'll show you how we go about doing that. The Rugged Homestead was built in 1921, so we're approaching 100 years on this house. Now this piping here hasn't been around that long, but it's pretty old. And as you can see, we've been doing some patchwork here. Even have some nice old asbestos along here. I actually had a plumber come in and take a look about repairing that, replacing that small section of pipe. And he essentially said it really couldn't be done because the whole thing really needed to be taken out. I've been using patches. You find them in the store, and I'll put a picture of what they are. Get them at the Home Depot. And it's a little ball of epoxy, which you stick into the hole, you rub it into the hole, and then you wrap it with a fiberglass infused tape. Now those patch kits, they cost about 13 bucks a piece. So as you can see, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, and there's 3 up there. So it's 6, 7. Yeah, I got about like 7 or 8 patches along here. And we'd have to do another one. So I'm going to show you how I go about patching this up. So wearing eye protection, first thing I'm going to do is clear off this metal to get down to the bare metal, not all this rust that's along here, so that the epoxy will adhere better, and I'll also be able to see exactly where the leak is. So I've got a metal wire brush in my drill, and I'm just going to go along and clean up the pipe here. Let's see how well we can see this here. Yeah, there it is. You can see it right there. So that little pinhole we'll be patching up. So I'm going to clean up right around it. That'll allow the epoxy to adhere to the pipe better, and then we'll wrap it up. That's actually clean enough because we're not going all the way around with the epoxy. So what I'm going to be using is a tube of EP200. In the patch kits, this is the epoxy that they actually use. It says sets as hard as steel in 15 to 20 minutes. Guy in the plumbing department at the Home Depot, he told me that I could just use the epoxy without the wrap, that you only use the wrap for when a cut in the pipe, when there was a large hole in the pipe, and then the wrap was used for that. Otherwise, you just use the epoxy. Now, I'll be honest, I don't just trust the epoxy to do that work. It is like a bit of clay. It's got the dark and the lighter color, and one's a hardener for it. So you just mix it together and knead the 2 pieces together and make sure it's well mixed. Once you have it well mixed, what I like to do is take a very small amount and put that right over the hole and actually press it up into the hole. And you want to keep it dry as much as possible because the water. Now this, by the way, this system has been depressurized. I've had the heat off since this morning, and so these pipes are really cold when it's on. These things are super hot. So now I just take a little bit more epoxy and I start spreading it out. You want to make sure you end up covering up that whole area really well. If you continuously work this though, it'll stick to your fingers and end up lifting off. So you have to work it just enough, but not too much. There. That should be sufficient to plug up that hole. Now the next part is the challenging part. So this is what we're going to be using. It's the Bondo brand fiberglass resin. So this large container can be used over and over again. I've only used like this much out of it. And it comes with a hardener. You only use a couple of drops for each application. This is a 1 ounce scoop, and we're going to be using a half of this. I've discovered that that's all you need for these applications. I also have an acid brush, which I'll use to paint onto the pipes, the mixture onto the pipes, and a stirrer to mix up the resin with the hardener. And then I also have fiberglass cloth. This is what we'll be using to wrap around the pipe. I'll be cutting a section of this off, a strip, and then that'll be wrapped around the pipe. And I'm going to recommend not using the 99-cent scissors from Harbor Freight Tools to make the cuts. Makes your job a lot harder. Okay, so there's our strip, and this will be sufficient just to wrap around the patch. As I said, a half ounce of this resin, and pour it into this container. 3/4, I guess. I'm actually going to cut another one of these out just to have enough on hand to wrap around the pipe. Now, normally for every ounce of resin that you use 6 drops of this. Since I'm only using half an ounce, I'm only going to use 3 drops of the hardener. By the way, the hardener comes with the resin, so you don't have to buy that separately. And now you just really mix this up really well so that the hardener is thoroughly incorporated into the resin. I've tried dipping the wrap into the resin and also painting the resin onto the pipe, and it's definitely easier to paint it on than to wrap it. 2 things about working with the fiberglass. 1, stinks to high heaven, so you should try to have good ventilation. The second thing is that you definitely need to wear protection on your hands. You don't want to get this resin onto your hands because it's going to be really tough to get off. I have a pair of gloves that I'm going to be wearing when I'm doing this, and throw them away afterwards because they're going to have that the resin on them, because I'll be using my hands to make sure I've got a real tight fit over the pipe. The other thing is the patch kit. Actually, I mean, it works really well, and it's got good benefits. For one, you just take the fiberglass infused fabric, you dunk that in water for 20 seconds, you take it out, and then you wrap it around real quick. This is a little bit different. It's not as neat as the patch kit, but if you don't mind getting your hands dirty and don't mind saving a ton of money doing it yourself, this using the individual components is a much better, more cost-effective option. Although this isn't like 5-minute epoxy, you don't have a whole heck of a lot of time to work with. I think it says about 12 minutes. So what I do is I start painting the pipe. And applying a generous amount over the whole section. But I also go over the top as well and around the back. I want that whole section of pipe covered. And what you end up noticing is that this thing almost turns clear once it's been like pressed in. It's not going to be like this wrap here. It's almost clear. Well, the epoxy will seep through. I do like to paint it on the outside of the wrap before I press this around, just so that there's good contact. And that noise you may hear is my inverter for my battery backup system. See all these little strands hanging off of here. They do get in the way. That's why you try to minimize the number of them that are there. Make sure there's plenty on there for when I apply it. And I will say this will dry. This will set up rock hard. So now I just take all these materials that I've used, and I'm going to throw it all out in the garbage outside so that the smell doesn't amount to too much. Okay, the patch is up. And it took us just a couple of minutes, and as you saw, I'll come down and I'll check it once it stops being tacky, but that should be sufficient. And again, it's not as elegant, not as neat as the patch kits, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper, you know. And so for the cost of those two patches alone that I did the last one and then this one just now, I would have spent that just in buying two patch kits. And I've got a lot more, another 20 feet of pipe to wait till it breaks down that I can be patching up in the future as we go along. But I am going to be replacing these pipes in the after the winter's over. So we'll come back in a couple hours and we'll check it out. But the patch is dry now, dry to the touch. And I've thrown the furnace on, and we start to have some water going through the system. So now it's let's check and see if it's going to hold. So we've got our patch here, and pipe is getting hot, and I'll end up, as I said, cutting these strands away. But the patch is held, and we've got heat again. It's a really simple job to do for yourself if you get one of those pinhole leaks in your steam radiator pipes. A little bit of epoxy, some fiberglass resin, fiberglass hardener, and the mat that you then cut into strips and just wrap it around. As I said, it takes a little bit longer, but you're back in business eventually. All right, if you like what you see, give the video a thumbs up and consider subscribing to the channel if you don't already do so, and hit that alarm button. That way you'll be notified right away when videos like this are posted. And if you found this information helpful, consider sharing the video with someone that you think might get some use out of it. Okay, thanks for watching.